Even the Washington Post is having a go at Biden over this. Here's a quote from the Post. As the death toll was escalating towards the triple digits, Biden's muted public approach stood in sharp contrast to his long-standing image of an empathetic leader. I'd probably dispute that, but anyway, the Post went on and offered critics a fresh angle to attack him politically. Now, Josh, we know the left-wing media well enough to know that this kind of statement isn't made accidentally. This is part of a wider agenda.
Well, I have no doubt that there are many left-wing elites, both in the media and outside the media, who would prefer that Joe Biden go home to his basement in Wilmington, Delaware, and kind of just rot away there in his palpable senility. And there's any number of other examples of this, by the way. It's not just the Washington Post here. Michelle Goldberg, the prominent progressive columnist for the New York Times, has had any number of columns over the past 6 months calling attention to Joe Biden's age, to his diminished mental capacity, to the various scandals plaguing his addle-brained crack addict son, Hunter Biden. I mean, there's been any number of other examples out there too. Even CNN has gotten into the game a little bit here. Now that he's announced, now that folks like RFK are his closest challenger, polling somewhere around 15%, not particularly close, to put it mildly here. And I just don't see it. I mean, I'm not sure how else to say it. I just don't see that Biden stepping aside at this point, pending obviously hospitalization, death, something like that no one in the right mind should obviously hope for. We hope that doesn't happen. So I just don't see it happening, pending something like that. I think it's too far into the game at this point. And I think Democrats at this point are probably just kind of stuck with him, whether they want him or not.
Biden is going to run again and be the leading contender for the Democrats. That's pretty frightening for us, even down here in Australia.
To me, it seemed clear that one of the many reasons for that raid going back over a year ago, to say nothing of these indictments, was for the deep state, the DOJ, and all the various nefarious actors deep in the heart of Washington, D.C., to try to ensure that Donald Trump would be the 2024 nominee, because at least from my perspective and based on most polling that I have seen, he is the least likely to defeat Joe Biden in a general election matchup. This is a political persecution. It is lawfare. It is a sprawling kind of legal jihad, you might will, against Donald Trump. And all they say about Trump is true. They've been trying to get him since before he was president, going back to 2016 and the FISA warrant with Carter Page and the surveillance. I mean, they've tried to get this guy 5 ways from Sunday. Trump, by the way, does not always do the best to avoid helping his enemies. He oftentimes will help his enemies in ways that I would find childish, perhaps, myopic, perhaps at worst. But no, ultimately, I mean, you're trying to choose someone who is best positioned to defeat Joe Biden and then implement the agenda that America needs to ultimately save the country. So, I mean, this rally around the flag effect, this sympathy can only go so far, I think. Yeah. His support among Republicans is definitely not what it once was. Back in 2016, I think he won like 93 to 94% of Republicans or something like that. I would be pretty surprised if he is the nominee in 24 if that number were above, I don't know, I'm totally speculating here, but call it 88%, which, on the margins, like, actually matters, right? If you look at the polling in America now when it comes to a hypothetical Trump-Biden rematch next fall, pretty much all the polling that I've seen shows that Trump would lose independent voters to Joe Biden. So you combine all of that, it starts to look really dicey. The electoral college math starts to look very dicey. And then you kind of exacerbate that with the fact that in many of kind of the key swing states in America, there are relatively few states at this point that really do decide the electoral college. Trump has alienated fellow Republicans in a lot of those states. Georgia is probably the best example of them all, where his fourth indictment is. So he's alienated the governor there, Brian Kemp, the governor, who's very popular there. He has an approval rating in Georgia of like plus 20, plus 25 points. Kemp is clearly now turning against Trump. His lieutenant governor might even testify against Trump at his trial. Possibly also true for the Secretary of State, Brad Raffensperger. So there's a lot of data points out there that suggest that he could be in for some trouble if he is the general election nominee.